Hey, everybody. So today we have my dear friend, Michael. Michael is the founder of a phenomenal company called CompStak. And if you haven't heard of them, I highly advise you go and check it out. Today we have Michael that's going to share with us his story, how he built this wonderful startup from basically his garage, 0 people, to 85 plus, from 0 money to $35 million raised. And I'm very excited to have him specifically share with us, the 101 of to build a startup, and the 101 what it means to go through, I guess, the emotional struggle and everything else that comes together with it to building a magnificent startup. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, Michael, let's start all the way from the beginning. Before you built this, this beautiful floor full of desks and a bunch of people here, before being a real estate agent, before going to college, where are you from and what was your upbringing like?
I'm originally from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is right outside of Philadelphia. It's a suburban, normal kind of suburb upbringing. Went to school there, and then after high school, went to Boston for college. Went to Babson, which is just right outside of Boston, to study entrepreneurship. And really, from always intended to be an entrepreneur, and leverage that and that experience to kind of identify opportunities to go after, but didn't have a business to start when I graduated. So after college, I got into commercial music production through an entrepreneur who I knew, who was running a company, and I got an opportunity to work with him. That only lasted about a year. It's kind of a crazy industry. From that, I became a commercial real estate broker, and from there, then started CompStak.
So let's go back to sure. You always knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Where did this drive come from?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess my father was an entrepreneur of sorts. He's a lawyer, but he was a sole practitioner, and I think I always just liked the idea of doing my own thing. Probably always had an issue with authority, growing up. So I've never want to work for somebody else, and really wanted to control my own destiny. But also, I like to build, and that's probably the biggest driver, is wanting to be able to build something and do something awesome, rather than just being a part of something else that's awesome, which is also good too. But for me, I wanted to be a builder.
Wow. So as a child, did you ever, in class, were you the type of kid that went to Costco, got his parents to go buy stuff wholesale, bring it back, sell it retail in your class, or things like that?
I definitely did stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. Like in high school, I was in the business program, and we needed money for the business program. And I saw someplace they were selling these cookies, these Otis Spunkmeyer cookies. I don't know if you've heard of those, but they have they sell you these frozen cookies, and they sell you this oven. It's a little convection oven. And when they bake the cookies in it, it pumps the smell of the cookies everywhere. And I was like, what if we got one of those ovens it's a little thing, in our classroom in high school, and we could, we could use that and make money selling these cookies to students and raise money for the business program. And I got the sales guy for the local distributor for Otis Spunkmeyer to come to the high school and present to our class. And ultimately, they didn't kick it off until after I graduated. But they agreed to do it. They sold the high school one of these ovens. And they fund the entire business program at the school off of these stupid cookies. Because, they got this captive audience of high school students. It's like fresh baked cookies with the smell wafting through the high school. And it became what funded the program.
I think
I always did stuff like that, for sure.
You should definitely go back and try to ask for commission on that.
Yeah.
Well, so then you go into entrepreneurship. I'm actually wondering, it's very interesting to say that, like learning entrepreneurship in college. What do you actually learn? Because entrepreneurship is more about, there's different multiple things, and people have different opinions of what an entrepreneur is. Is it inborn? Is it something you can learn? Is it something you go along? And so when you go into, is it something you can even study? So going to college, what did they teach you about entrepreneurship?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So Babson is a business school. You can only study business at Babson. And, one, it's just fundamental skills, right? So you have to take classes in all the different areas of business. So I took accounting classes and finance classes and marketing classes and organizational behavior and basically everything that kind of runs the gamut of what it means to be a business leader. It's a very similar program to what you'd have in an MBA program, except at the undergrad level. In fact, it is a lot of the same classes that Babson offers at both levels. So just understanding and having a well-rounded business education, which you need. When you're starting a company, you don't have a finance guy, you don't have a marketing person, you don't have whatever, you have yourself. And so you need to have some fundamental skills in all areas to be able to just sort of make sense of it. Right. And that came in massively useful. When I was putting together the initial financial plan, for CompStak and understood how a balance sheet works and how assets equals liabilities plus equity and how do you build a P&L and, how do you do the formulas and actually make the spreadsheet work? Like that was huge. The only regret I had was that I forgot half of what I learned, and I only remember the other half, if that. The other thing is at a place like Babson's very focused on entrepreneurship, and it causes you to change the way you view the world, where you're constantly seeking opportunity in things. When you're surrounded by people that are constantly starting businesses and thinking about entrepreneurial endeavors, the lens through which you view everything is through how can I make this better? What is the opportunity in this thing? And how can I do it better than the way it's been done before? Right. And I think that a lot of people just go through life accepting that things are the way they are and not even noticing that they don't have to be the way they are. Yeah. And I think that, being in that environment around other people who do that causes you to view the world in a way that can help you identify those opportunities and then have the tangible skill sets to act on them.
So then, that's absolutely, totally correct and incredible. So tell me about some of the crazy ideas you had before you started CompStak. Going through entrepreneurship college and thinking you want to be an entrepreneur, I'm sure you came about like some ideas that you look back now saying, hey, I had that idea who knows how long ago, before you even started, or some of the other crazy stuff you envisioned?
I've had a lot of different ideas over the years, some that we tried to act on, some others. Like in college, we thought about creating a mobile tea van for bubble tea, because we thought bubble tea was cool at the time. It was like not particularly mainstream, and thought we could, create a bubble tea business. That I'm glad we didn't pursue that. A lot of stuff that I just sort of like random ideas. I think like one idea that it's past the point now, but at the time would have been great. I had a concept called the bar, which was basically a means, basically a plug-in for like your cable box, where you could have, how like ESPN has the bar on the bottom of the screen. They had that then, but there wasn't technology beyond that. The thought was to be able to have choose what kind of bar you want for what kind of information, news, sports, whatever, at the bottom of the screen while you're watching some other channel. Which is the kind of thing that like now, people can do in different ways. But I don't know, there's lots of things that have probably come to fruition in different ways that maybe I'd thought of in some capacity, but ideas are kind of a dime a dozen. It's all about execution. And I don't think too much about, about the ideas. I think that you can find ideas in a lot of places, but it's a matter of whether you're willing to actually go to the lengths of getting them done.
And that's what separates, the boys from the men, the real entrepreneurs, the people that, just have a dream. It's about actually going ahead and executing like what you did over here. So then let's figure out, where did this idea for CompStak come about?
Sure.
What was the problem you're trying to fix?
Sure. So I was a commercial real estate broker. Right. I was working in Manhattan doing mostly office leasing and also data center transactions. And the idea came out of the Monday morning meetings that we had in brokerage. So all the major brokerage firms have them, most of them still do, where we would all sit around a big boardroom table and we'd be sharing comp information. So all of us would sit around the table and talk about deals that have taken place in the market. Oh, so-and-so signed this lease for X number of dollars per square foot and got this much in TI, this much in free rent. Right. These are the brokers who did the deal, blah, blah, blah. And so I'd be frantically calling up other brokers that I know on Sunday night, trying to get whatever comps I can and giving them whatever comps they needed so that we could each go to our Monday morning meetings the next day and have this currency of comps to share with the meeting. And then we'd all just sit around the table talking about random deals. And the problem was that, like, at the time, I was representing creative firms and tech companies. I repped Facebook and eBay and people like that. But I repped them in locations like this in Midtown South. But everybody's talking about, you know, hedge fund deals, law firm deals, private equity deals in Midtown. And most of this was irrelevant to me. And then we'd have like our research guy who'd be sitting on at the end of the table taking notes on what people are saying. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, why don't we all put this information in one place across the industry so we can actually find what we need when we need it rather than trading random information for other random information.
So that was the base of the problem.
Yeah.
So you come across this issue then, and you see it's something that your firm is constantly dealing with. So what did you try to do to fix it?
So the thought was, nobody's going to share this information out of the kindness of their hearts. You have to incentivize them. And that's the way the existing ecosystem worked, where people were sharing data with their friends, with their other brokers, and they're getting other data in return. People were willing to share if they could get other valuable information in return. And so the thought was, how do we take that offline process and move it online? And so, the first step for me was to figure out who's going to help me build this, because I'm not a tech guy. And I had tried to start something else a couple of years before, also a tech company where I hired some random guy I found online, and it was a disaster.
Okay.
And so that was actually like a cheap lesson, because I was able to realize that's not how you do it. Like, if you're going to build a tech company, you need a technical co-founder who believes in it, who's going to be in it with you.
Right.
So what I did was focus on trying to find a technical co-founder. And I was going to tech startup events basically every night of the week, just trying to meet people. And I'm making the same pitch of what I'm trying to do every single night, trying to find somebody who can build it. And eventually met my co-founder, Vadim, who's our CTO, and told him about the idea, and he was excited by it. And we ultimately were able to start building something together. And so he worked on building it, but the idea was simply to take the offline process and move it online.
Right. Well, so many questions. I know there's so many lessons currently that I just learned. First of all, you're still working full time at your brokerage firm.
Yeah.
When you do that.
Yeah.
And so you had this side hustle at night trying to find the technical co-founders. You're constantly hustling it out. It's such a big thing. Also, like, everyone's like, okay, how do I find a technical co-founder? How do I find it?
Yeah.
If there's a will, there's a way.
No, in this case, it was just a lot of hustle. I didn't know anybody, and just had to keep looking.
Well, also, I guess the issue where you're so passionate about this issue that you want to fix it so bad, that you had to go find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you started this firm, which essentially you want to call right now a prop tech firm, profit technology. You started in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, right? So 8.5 years ago, 7 years ago, there was real estate wasn't even like a thought process for technology.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Right. So when you were trying to convince people that check out this issue, I believe this issue is going to be $1 billion issue, be a massive thing. How'd you do? What was your pitch towards them? Like saying, hey.
Yeah, it was really hard. Every angel investor we're pitching, micro VC, whatever. They had no interest in real estate tech. They're like, real estate, is that a big enough market? That was always the thing. It's like, talk to me about the addressable market, and how do you prove that this addressable market is big enough? And look, in truth, when I say that now, people laugh because prop tech is so hot. But actually, there are very few vertical markets that can support businesses that are just for an industry vertical. Most of the really giant SaaS companies out there, and B2B companies generally, are not in a specific industry vertical. Right. And so it was a fair critique. But commercial real estate is the second largest asset class in the world, behind the bond market, bigger than the equities market. It's a massive, massive market. So had to basically keep telling people that. And I think and they didn't understand real estate tech. And I think what I learned was that, one, I had to handle a lot of rejection, or we had to handle a lot of rejection. And two, had to have a ton of conviction, and had to position myself as the expert. Don't let the investors tell you this isn't going to work, or you're wrong about this, or question it, but basically teach them. Let me explain to you why this is a giant market. Let me explain to you why this is a great opportunity. I'm the expert. Let me tell you about it, and let me hopefully convince you.
Right.
And I always advise entrepreneurs of the same today. It's like, don't let yourself get shot down. Prove that you actually know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
And then if you can prove that you know what you're talking about, then you set the metrics for success and you determine what makes sense and you inform the investors of it.
Wow. So emotional resilience, conviction, and become the thought leader, the expert. That's incredible. So let's start with the first one. Becoming the thought leader, the expert. How do you position yourself to, become that thought leader, that expert within the industry that you, let's say, for example, for a new entrepreneur, he decides he wants to start a startup, and he's trying to approach the other people that he believes, obviously, that either know, okay, let's take it back, that he's approaching other people. How does he position himself as an expert in that category?
I think the only way to be an expert at something is and to say I was an expert, I was 5.5 years in commercial real estate brokerage. I was an expert as compared to VCs. Whether I was an expert as compared to brokers, no. But I think the only way you become an expert in something is spending a lot of time doing it and studying it, And I think you have to be thoughtful about your approach to it. Mm-hmm. So when you're working in an industry, are you just doing your job as you do your job, or are you reading about more broadly what that industry is all about and the nuts and bolts of that industry and understanding where your job is in the context of that industry more broadly? And I tried to do that. I tried to really understand what makes the industry tick. Why are things done in a certain way? Again, it goes back to approaching problems with an opportunity mindset and trying to see where the opportunities lie in relation to what you do.
Right. Okay, so you have this, you're focusing on this, you have all the three things, you have the emotional resilience, you have the conviction, you're becoming the thought leader, you're approaching VCs, taking me through the stages of, if we're going to divide CompStak into 3 different stages, raising this seed round, raising Series A, raising Series B, as you grow from 0 to 100, take me through those 3 different stages of the growth and, and what you went through, the hardships that you faced.
Well, at first, it's a matter of just trying to convince people that this makes sense and that they should back you. And getting that first investor is the hardest thing ever. Right. Who's going to back somebody who nobody else has backed? Mm-hmm. And so you have to try to build this FOMO and make everybody think that everybody else is interested and all this kind of thing. And it's really hard when you don't have a proven track record. A serial entrepreneur can do that, right? Look, I built this other thing before. Everybody wants to back me. Much, much easier. But we spent. It was a year of trying to raise money before we raised our first cent, and it was a matter of one, I think doing a lot of listening and learning and taking the feedback you hear from all those prospective investors and what they like and don't like, and then changing it, right? Somebody says, I don't like that. Okay, well, you stop saying that in your next pitch. I think, wouldn't it be great if you did this? No, all of a sudden in the next meeting, we're doing that, and it's so really listening to the feedback you're getting and incorporating it. Then getting enough of that feedback to know when you should incorporate something, when you shouldn't, because a lot of investors will tell you that, whatever ideas, but they're wrong, and some are right, some are wrong, and some you're not sure. Mm-hmm. So you have to be thoughtful about that and incorporate that. So that was the first stage, just sort of overcoming that hurdle of getting people interested.
So at that stage, question, you did that for a year. How did you keep showing up? Because I'm assuming there's plenty of times, screw this, forget about it. It's just way too hard. The rejection or this, or, you don't see progress moving. How do you keep yourself showing up every single day?
Well, there's 2 things. One, you can't be reliant on just getting funding as the means of growing your business. That's kind of bullshit. You want to get funding, prove that you've got a real business. Right. A part of the reason that we didn't raise money was because we hadn't done it before, and we didn't know the ins and outs of how to play the game and raising money. But the bigger reason we didn't raise money is because we didn't have a product, and we didn't have users, and we didn't have traction. In the absence of being a serial entrepreneur that everybody's willing to throw money at because they believe in you and trust you, you need to show traction. Right. And so that's what we focused on is, Vadim built the initial sort of alpha of CompStak. And then this guy named Jeff Domke, who was our first chief product officer, we brought him on a contract basis to design the first product that looked nice and was user friendly. Then we actually brought a product to market. Mm-hmm. And that was basically end of 2011, beginning of 2012. We actually had something out there, and alpha, beta, whatever you want to call it, and we got people using it. And then I was calling up every single broker that I knew, and lots of brokers I didn't know. I went through a list of every broker in New York, basically, and said, "Hey, remember me? Blah blah blah. Starting this thing for comps. Can you send me whatever comps you've got? You know what I mean?" And then they would send them, and then I would be the one entering them on the site, and and then I would be calling them every day saying, "Hey, you haven't logged in this week. Are you going to log in? You're going to log in. You're going to send me comps. You're going to log in. You're going to send the comps. You're going to log in." And just manually hand crank the machine to get people to share data and to log in. And then eventually people are actually finding value in it, and they want to share data themselves. And then when you go back out to the investors and you say, "Oh, and by the way, there's lots of people using it, and look at all the data they've submitted," then it's a different story. It's like, okay, you're not just selling a dream, you're actually showing that there's something here.
So that was that. So then you're finally able to build that conviction through getting the users and going to investors, and you raise that money. So what was the second phase of CompStak?
Second phase, I guess, is raising money, right? So we raised some money from angel investors. First money, I think, came in June 2012, and then raised some more over the summer, and then we applied to 500 startups in Mountain View, which is a great startup accelerator, one of the top ones in the world, I think.
Right.
And we went out there and we got accepted, and we did 500 startups for 4 months. While we were out in Silicon Valley, we focused on launching our second market, which was San Francisco. And I focused 100% of my time on two things. One was getting the second market launched, and two was fundraising. So first focused on kind of doing a second tranche of the angel round before demo day, with a gap before demo day, and then focused on raising the Series A for right after demo day. And the goal was that we would raise the Series A from Silicon Valley investors by the time we finished demo day, and we pretty much did. We got a term sheet for our Series A week after demo day.
Wow, that's incredible.
That was a massive accomplishment, but we had to be very disciplined to make that happen.
So then you get the Series A, you come back to New York, you build, and then you start scaling up the stuff.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some of the biggest hardships that you went through from that period until you get raising Series A, going from the beginning to then.
Up until the A, I mean, it didn't feel like hardships. Like, it's obviously a struggle, but honestly, like, at that time, I found to be, some of the most fun and some of the least stressful of growing the business, because we had some money in the bank and we were used to having no money, and we were able to start building the team, and we were able to just get out there and do stuff. And I think when you're that early stage, when you're seed stage, right, everybody expects you to fail. Your resting state is failure, which means that anything that isn't failure is amazing.
Right.
It's like there's no expectations on you, and whoever's put in money in you at that point fully expects that they will probably lose it. And it's just like so everything is a victory. And so that was great. I don't know. I didn't find that time to be particularly stressful. It was a lot of work, but it was work that I loved doing. We all loved doing. It was hard work, but it was fun.
Right. And did you feel like that mindset changed as you grew?
Oh, for sure. I mean, with every successive round of funding, you've got investors that are counting on you to succeed more and more. You've got employees that are relying on you for their livelihood and expecting you to be able to pay them. And they know, and the further on you get, the more that they're expecting a stable job, and the less they're expecting that they're going to be out on the street any day. Right. So the pressures increase exponentially with, as you raise more money and go into successive rounds and take on more expectations. You have customers that are expecting things from you, and employees and investors and so many stakeholders that you don't want to let down.
Wow. So then, as a first-time founder, as your first startup, how did you evolve as a founder, as a CEO? You started with 0 employees, now you have 85 employees. How did you evolve, and then what steps did you take that someone else can apply and do
Well, I mean, you have no choice.
it?
I think if you want to scale a business, you have to constantly stop doing things and hand that off to other people. I mean, that's the key thing. The first thing, which I think was really helpful, was when we went out to Mountain View for 500 startups. Because what happened was we had a little bit of a business, and we had bills to pay and operational things to deal with, and everybody said to me, and one thing that you can do that helps you more than anything is to talk to other entrepreneurs that are just a little bit further ahead of you in the process.
Right.
If you're pre-seed, talk to somebody who's at the seed stage. If you're at the C stage, talk to somebody who's at the Series A, and they'll tell you, how to not screw up what they screwed up, and how to do things the right way. And so the feedback that I heard from everybody was like, as CEO, your number one job is to make sure there's money in the bank, to grow this company, and everything else should, you got to try to take off your plate as much as possible. The other thing is, when you're really early stage, your job is to kind of do everything. When you're really early stage, your job is to do everything so that if you're a tech company, that your developers aren't distracted by other things, and your co-founders aren't distracted by other things. Your product people aren't. Let them focus on building the product. You focus on everything else. Then you focus on fundraising, right? And you focus on growth. And so when we went out to Mountain View, that's what I did. 100% fundraising and 100% growth. And so all the other operational bullshit, I handed off to this guy, Danny is still with us. Danny was our really first full-time employee, and he stayed back in New York. And it's like, okay, Danny, everything else is you.
Right.
You're paying the bills. You're dealing with our interns that we had hired back in New York. You're getting the data loaded into the system and hiring people to help make that happen. You're running everything else, and I'm focusing on growth and fundraising. And the kind of geographical separation, I think, helped force me to get into that mindset. Frankly, I think I did a better job not being distracted by other things then than I have since.
Oh, really?
But constantly trying to evaluate, like, is this thing that I'm doing something that, at a minimum, I can do better than anybody else. Right. And ideally, it's something that only I can do, and if it's something that, I can do better than somebody else, can I find somebody else who can do it as well as me, or close to as well as me? And if not, then try to scale up the team around you. And I think you constantly have to be thinking about that. Like, what am I doing that somebody else should be doing, and how do I get the right people in place to do it, or empower people who maybe haven't had that opportunity to try it?
Very interesting. Yeah. So then, like, walk me through, life, the day of a CEO.
Well, I would say every day is a little different. For me, it's a lot of meetings, more than anything, meetings, and mostly internal meetings, some external meetings. If it's, for sales, I get involved in the bigger sales and the bigger kind of strategic partnership opportunities. I feel that, those kind of things that really impact the trajectory of the company, I need to be involved with. And if they're big numbers, I get involved with them. Otherwise, I, try to stay out of most of, the individual, day-to-day sales, and try to focus on strategy. I'd say one of the biggest struggles of any CEO is carving out time for yourself to be strategic and be thoughtful when you're constantly being pulled into meetings and pulled in different directions. And I continue to struggle with that. I can't say that I'm the best at that.
Well, do you have any certain type of process in order to do that, or anything you take for yourself?
Not really. I probably should. I mean, generally, I try to be as accessible to everybody as I can. My calendar is available to everybody in the company, and I always say to anybody in the company, if you want to meet with me, just book my calendar. If it's free, I'll do it. Which means I end up with a pretty booked calendar. But so I probably should be more intentional about carving out time. I end up doing that more on the weekends. So that's what I do. Is like I'm booked up with meetings during the week, and then carve out time on the weekends to try to do a little bit more thinking and to deal with emails.
So here's like an important question. Like saying, you're married, you have kids, 2 children. How has that enhanced your emotional startup life?
How has it enhanced my emotional startup life? I think Well, it's probably, it's probably allowed me to have a little bit more empathy,
Okay.
when dealing with people. But I'm not going to bullshit. I think that having kids when you're running a startup makes it harder to run your startup, and it also makes it harder for you to be a good father. And I think that there are people who say, "Oh, it focused me and it caused me to schedule my time better and stuff like that." And good for them. That's great.
Right.
And it has for me too. I definitely have had to be more disciplined with my time, but I think you end up having to make compromises. I think that I'd like to spend more time with my kids and with my wife than I do, and I'd like to be spending more time in the office than I do. Before I had kids, if I had a massively clogged up email inbox, I stayed as late as I needed to clear it out. Now it just sits, and I hope I get to it on the weekends. And that's okay. Maybe it causes me to not waste my time with certain emails and certain things that I don't need to be dealing with. But there's compromises, and it's hard.
I can imagine. Like, the work-life balance doesn't even exist. The work-life harmony.
Yeah, yeah.
So, take me to one of the pivotal moments that you knew that transformed. Could have been your first client. It could have been raising your Series B or whatever it may be. That pivotal moment that you knew you guys are here to stay and take it to the next level.
Well, there's been a bunch of them. I think I guess you never know you're there to stay. Because
Right.
part of being a startup too is that you have to take big risks, and so when things are stable, you go and take another big risk that makes things unstable, right? Like when we raised our Series B, we were a few weeks away from cash flow break even, and then we raised a bunch of money and started spending a lot more money, and now we're far from break even again. So but that was a meaningful pivot point. Meaningful point where we said, "Oh wow, like we can see cash flow break even.
Right.
Like this is a real business. It doesn't require burning lots of capital just to keep the lights on."
Right.
Our first customers were massively meaningful. Our first two customers were all the way back in 2012, actually, and were Vornado and Tishman Speyer.
It's the biggest ones in New York.
And that was massive. It was a huge proof point for us. It was key to why we were able to raise the Series A. I mean, we raised our Series A with virtually no revenue. We had basically two customers,
Right.
but they were two name brand customers,
Right.
and it made all the difference. It was actually somewhat of a false positive. We
Okay.
thought because we closed the first two people we pitched, and because they were massive landlords, that therefore selling would be easy, and we just do it over and over and over again. Spoiler alert, it's not easy. And it wasn't easy, and it was a false positive. But in any event, so obviously the first customers were massive. Every fundraise, feels like a massive accomplishment, and also feels like a big, massively scary responsibility. You're very excited for like a minute, and then all of a sudden you realize everything that comes along with it. Obviously big customer milestones. Each time you sign your new biggest deal, it's like it's a new milestone. Recently we had an experience with a customer. It's been with us for a long time, where we were talking to their procurement people about a big expansion, and the procurement people said, "Listen, we've been a customer of yours for a long time. We've spoken to people in all these various offices, about this expansion. And we've spoken to people who are existing users. They love you. They think we're great. You're great. And, we're pushing us on how long of a contract we could sign with them, because they knew that they were going to be a long-term partner,
Right.
and wanted to lock in the contract so they don't have to deal with it every year."
Wow.
And that just felt so grown up, that the procurement people are like, "How do we lock in a long-term relationship with this company?" versus saying like, "How do we know you're still going to be in business in a year?" You know what I mean?
To give you that real validation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hope you went out there and celebrated.
Well, we actually haven't finalized it yet, but it should be a nice expansion of that contract. And in any event, it's those kind of things, are great. Similar experience recently. We have a great client advisory board with some of our very top customers, in the world, and it's people like, Nuveen and BlackRock and Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo and what have you, and they're all sitting around the table in this our client advisory board meeting, and um, we had this meeting, went really, really well.
Mhm.
And I came home and I said to my wife, I said, this client advisory board, today went amazing. I did absolutely nothing for it. And she says, wow, you're a CEO. But and that was really personally very gratifying to, to feel that, that conviction around the team that we built, that we can bring in some of the world's top, real estate investors and lenders, have these people flying from around the country for a meeting, to an advisory board meeting to help us build our business. And I had nothing to do with it. We had a strong enough team that they could organize and orchestrate all of this, and it just happens. And that's very gratifying.
So then, let's take a step back. Obviously, to build up this type of team takes an incredible sales team in order to get them in the door. And it takes a great, customer success team in order to make sure that they're happy in the onboarding process.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the sales process. How to build a fluid, great sales process for enterprise contracts, which is what you guys target.
I wish I had the answer. We're still trying to figure it out. I mean, we've built out a great team. Chris Aronson, who's our chief commercial officer, is terrific. He was, before he was at CompStak, he was CEO of EDR, which he sold to Lightbox for over $200 million. So try to bring on great people. But process is key. I mean, I'm obsessive when it comes to process and sales. I am much more interested in salespeople who are great at process than I am at salespeople who are, really compelling in meetings and that can talk a good game. The process is critical, and I don't have all the answers. I mean, we try to focus on sales operations. We focus on everything being logged appropriately in Salesforce. We focus on not just the outcomes, but the activities. How many, and looking at the funnel, how many calls were made that led to how many demos, that led to how many in-person meetings, that led to how many closed sales, and trying to bring in the right level of training and consistency. And we're trying to up our game in that regard every day. I think that the best salespeople, though, are focused in their process and try to screen very well for those people too in hiring. I think that it's a matter of I try to ask the right questions when we're hiring people to get to, what is your process? Do you have a process? Is that the way you think about selling, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants? The fly by the seat of your pants people, they can be good salespeople, but that's not the way to build a team, and that doesn't lead to predictable revenue.
Gotcha. That's so true. I mean, you have some passion and some very compelling, and there's real excitement in life and everything. But is this something that could be, there's data behind it that could be used again? Else? That's so true. Yeah. So if you had to do this whole thing again, you probably wouldn't start, but then
probably not. No, probably would do something different.
What would you do different?
Well, it's a good question. I think that building a data business is incredibly hard. I didn't realize how hard it would be. It's not like a normal SaaS business, where you build a product and people can start using it. When you're building a data company, you get in data, and then maybe people use it, maybe they don't. You get in more data, maybe they will, maybe they won't, maybe a little bit higher odds. Get a little more data, a little more data, a little more data, and still not valuable, and then all of a sudden you hit an inflection point where you've got enough data and it's good enough quality and it's comprehensive enough that it becomes exponentially more valuable, but it doesn't follow the normal hockey stick. The blade of the hockey stick is much longer in the data business because you've got to build up the data. Now that said, data businesses are incredibly valuable, incredibly defensible, because once you've built a unique proprietary database, it's a massive competitive moat.
Right.
But when I start another data company today, I don't know. It's really freaking hard, and I didn't realize how hard it would be or how long it would take. It's also a marketplace business, and trying to build a two-sided marketplace is also one of the hardest things you can ever do. Why do you think that there's only one big social network and one big professional network? Well, they're marketplaces. Right. You've got to have users on both sides communicating with each other. Here, for us, we've got to have people contributing data together to have the data. Right. And then, but people don't want to contribute data unless there's already data in there. Yeah. And then we've got to build that marketplace, and not only do it once, over and over and over again, we have to do it in every market. Yeah. And so building a marketplace business is hard. Again, once the marketplace is running well, it's defensible, but it's hard, and it can have a good network effect. But Um, I don't know that I would do a marketplace business again, and I don't know that I do data business again, just to be perfectly honest, just because it's so hard. But on the flip side, the harder something is to do, the better the business it could be ultimately, and the more defensible it can be. And it means that it's that hard for anybody else to compete with you.
Yes.
So that's the benefit of doing hard things. But you have to be really freaking gritty and be able to bear out the pain and suffering of trying to get to that point where you've built something that has a real competitive moat.
Like I said, was it anything easy goes easy, anything that comes hard, it's here to stay.
Yeah.
So let's say, these kids, you have a group of college students from Babson Entrepreneurship School that just graduated, and they came here to meet their alumni from the school. They come to meet and be with you, and each one of them is planning to start a startup. What are the top 3 things that you tell them to focus on to do? It can be more than that, or less than that.
Well, top 3 things. One, if they're coming right out of school, I'd say, are you ready to do it?
Right.
Do you feel that you have the right idea and the right expertise, to take this on? And if they do, then go for it. If not, what do you need to do to learn to be really good at it? We talked about being an expert, right? If I'm, if I think it's a really great idea to build a startup in, some sort of new kind of in the banking industry or virtual currency or something like that.
Right.
Well, maybe I want to go get a job in banking and learn about how finance works before I start that. And you could do that for a year, right? To and go in it. If you go in it specifically with the goal of learning the ins and outs of that industry, think about how much better equipped you'll be to build that company later. So maybe that'd be the first thing I'd say is think about what you need to do to be, the expert in your field so that you can be the one to start this. And 2, I would say you got to build a phenomenal team. You can't try to do it on your own. Maybe if there's 3 different people starting 3 different businesses, maybe the 3 of them just join together and decide on one they want to do together. And the right type of people on that founding team, right? If you're a tech company, that 500 startups would always preach kind of like a 3-legged stool. So in a tech, so a tech company should have an engineer, a product person, and a business person who really understands the domain. That's the 3-legged stool.
Right.
And I believe in that. Can you get away without that? Can somebody have the skill set? Can you have a tech person who also is, knows how to do product a little bit? Or can you be a business person that's also a product person? Sure. But having that 3-legged stool, I think, is a pretty compelling thing.
So then let's talk about, because I heard you mention quite a few times already, it's all about the team. And you give so much emphasis to the team, which is the most incredible thing. And the team is what really makes a difference. What are some practical tips for hiring? And to bring someone on the team, because you have to, and I'm assuming, you're hiring for multiple things. If they actually do the job, you're hiring for culture and all that. So what are practical tips for hiring? And then what's a good onboarding process to make sure they get involved and you could bring them up to another level?
Well, practical tips for hiring. Well, I guess there's a lot of different things. I mean, and I can't say there are things that I thought were one way and then learned over time that maybe they weren't the other. For me, I think I look for people who have, we have values in what we hire for. And I don't imagine these would vary that much if I started a new company. We look for doers, how have people proven in their career that they have done, great things, that they have taken on challenges that are hard. Or maybe they did it and showed it in college. They started a student organization, or they, launched a podcast, or they, built a nonprofit, or whatever the case may be. How have they shown that they're a doer and they're willing to take action? That's a key one. One that has become a value, maybe that wasn't one at the forefront, but has become one over time. That's a big one for me, is intellectual curiosity. Is it someone who likes to learn things and for the sake of learning, not for the sake of money or for the sake of climbing the ranks, but just because they care to be smart and to try new things and to understand things? Those kind of people just tend to really thrive here, and I think generally in startups, because they're willing to take on new challenges and figure out how to achieve them because it's fun for them. Look for people who don't make excuses. If they made mistakes in their past, they're honest and own up to them, and then are straightforward about where they want to be and what they want to do. try to obviously look for, people who have had some longevity in the companies they've been with. It's always, I think anybody will tell you that people who jumped around a lot in their resume is a red flag.
Okay.
Not always, but,
Right.
most people aren't willing to take a risk on that without really some understanding. And the other thing that's, key if you can do it is back channeling, which is like, okay, go on LinkedIn. Who do I know who might have worked with this person at that company? Not the reference they gave, but like, somebody who might know them from some background that can help us really understand what that person's all about.
Well, we know the reference they gave is always going to say positive things.
Yeah.
Always.
Although we do those too, because sometimes you don't know somebody, and then it's just a matter of like asking the right kind of questions to the good references to sort of try to dig in as deeply as you can, get to the bottom of it.
I mean, those are incredible practical tips, and also like those are great personal values. Be intellectually curious, always remain a doer, always own up to your faults. Make sure your reputation is the most important thing. Make sure people have good things to say about you.
Yes.
Wow. So, what are some non-obvious habits that have made you better?
Well, I think I'll point out one that my co-founder would say about me, which is that I always try to view things as an opportunity where it might not seem obvious, but I'll try it anyway. Call up this person who probably isn't going to return your call. Go to some event that may or may not be valuable, but maybe something will come out of it. Pitch some investor that you think you're not a fit for. You don't want to do that too much because it's like a double-edged sword. As an entrepreneur, you need to stay focused, but also there's so many different things that have come out of opportunities that we just didn't expect, and trying to pursue those different opportunities, that you don't expect.
That's what expectations that don't lead to anything most of the time. Stuff that you don't think like that. Yeah. So, what do you do to get out of your comfort zone? Because assuming you wake up in the morning, I'm not going to assume. You face fear a lot, or you face discomfort. Multiple things. I mean, now you already have a whole entire team, so it might be different. But when you face that blockage, that fear, what do you do to push forward?
You know what? For me, I don't. It's not really. I guess it doesn't feel like an issue from the standpoint that I feel like as CEO and as founder of the company, I don't have any choice. Right. If something has to get done, and I'm the person who has to do it, I just fucking do it. Am I allowed to curse on your podcast? Maybe you'll bleep it out. But like, it's just like I don't feel like I have a choice in the matter, and so I just do it. I don't know. I mean, like, barring I guess very few exceptions. I don't know. I guess I don't really like. I don't feel like I have an option.
Just go through all the way. Well,
yeah.
So we're holding in 2020. PropTech is the phenomenon. I think, if I'm not mistaken, who knows how many, crazy amount of money was invested in 2019, over billions of dollars. When you came in, probably wasn't even close to 100 million. Now it's billions. What do you think, we're heading, not asking for projections, but where do you see this going?
Well, I think where it's going to go is a lot more consolidation. I think we've seen a lot of consolidation. I was predicting, I think a lot of people were predicting consolidation 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
It didn't really meaningfully seem to start happening until last year. I mean, there was some the year before, but there was a lot last year, and I think there will be a lot more this year. Companies, bigger companies acquiring smaller companies merging. There's a lot of people who've raised money that maybe aren't going to be sustainable on their own, or who just make more sense joining up with other companies.
Right.
And we're companies that'll go out of business as well if they don't merge or consolidate or get acquired or whatever. So I think that's where a lot of it's going to be. There'll continue to be money raised. There's a real haves and have-nots situation in real estate tech. Most of the money has gone to much more mature companies. And then the remainder has mostly gone to early stage companies, but they're little checks, so they don't add up to that much. Right. There's not a lot in the middle. Very few Series B companies, very few Series C companies, almost no Series D companies. And then you've got Airbnb and WeWork, and like if you consider them real estate prop tech, there's massive amounts of money in some very big players, and decent amount in the early stage, and not a lot in the middle. And the middle's hard.
Right.
We're in the middle; it's hard, and crossing that chasm to get to be one of the big ones, and figuring that out. And some companies will figure it out, and some won't. So
that's very interesting. Never even thought about that. That's so true. There's nothing there's nothing like either.
There's some, but not a lot, and that's where a lot of the consolidation is happening. Is in the middle.
Nice. So, what do we tell a young Michael? Coming out of college, there's multiple options you could do. You could go ahead and start that T-bubble bus, or you could go ahead and become a barista in Starbucks, or you could, who knows, working as a real estate agent. What message do we tell?
I would say, as much as possible, try to be more of a long-term thinker. I always thought I'd start a business, and so I didn't plan in college. I mean, I was pretty disciplined around getting involved in lots of things in college, but I always thought I'd be an entrepreneur, so I never thought about a job. I was like, I'm going to start a company. I didn't think about, is there an industry I like? How can I learn about that industry and then get it, and then start something in that industry? I just thought, I'm going to start a company. I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I would say the advice I would give myself is try to be more thoughtful about, what the future might hold, and try to think of more long term rather than short term.
I definitely like that. And especially now, it's like now this is the most important thing, because Generation Z, millennials, it's all about immediate gratification. We want to become rich tomorrow. The children these days are looking up to people like you, the CEO of tech founders, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and all this.
Yeah, that's me. Put me in the same category as Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. That's the first time that's ever happened.
Well, you get in there. And they see that. And it's not the sport players anymore. It's these guys, you guys, people, the founders. And it's very hard. They think,
but that's actually exactly to the point. Actually, come to the thing when you talk about Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook started in 2004. I was in college in New England, which means I was one of the earliest people on Facebook, because it started in private schools in New England. And I remember logging into Facebook, and it said on the bottom of Facebook at the time, it said a Mark Zuckerberg production. And I remember being like, it's Mark Zuckerberg kid. Wow, this is really cool. Maybe I should call him up and see about working with him. And then I remember distinctly where I was lying in my bed in my dorm room thinking, fuck that. I'm going to build my own thing. It's going to be better than Facebook. And it's again, it goes back to this long-term versus short-term thinking. If I was thinking about long-term, I would have said, you know what? I am going to call up Mark Zuckerberg and see if I can work with him and learn something from this experience. I could start something later. But no, I was too set on I had to start something then. And even though that thought crossed my mind, I dismissed it. So there you go.
It's not too late. You try to give him a call. You might answer.
There you go.
Wow. But Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I
appreciate
learned so much over here, and there's no doubt in my mind that plenty of people can benefit from this. And it goes without saying, anything I can do for you, for CompStak, anything else, never hesitate to reach out. And if you look, what is it you're looking for? That people here, are you looking for more people to hire?
We're always looking for people to hire, and we're looking for more customers. So anybody who needs great real estate data, let me know. And happy to be helpful to anybody that I can in the space.
So I hope, and not even doubt, that people are going to take advantage of that. I'm going to reach out to you. And if anyone's looking for a great company, for great culture, definitely reach out to Michael or to CompStak and apply. But Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.